Hey guys, I'm Riley Gaines and I'm speechless.
My guest today made waves after she tied with Leah Thomas for 5th place in the 200-yard freestyle at the 2022 NCAA Championship meet. Since then, she's taken a stand highlighting the need to protect women's sports and has made a name for herself as a leader within the conservative movement. Her advocacy has driven her to make many appearances on national news networks and speak on college campuses. A woman that frankly has more balls than any man I know, Riley Gaines, is here today, everybody, and she is speechless. Riley, thank you so much for joining me.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Appreciate it. Well, honest, I know that you have many other places you could be talking to right now, but I want to make sure that everybody knows just who Riley Gaines is. They should already know, honestly, at this point. But let's dive in right from the beginning. So you started swimming at the age of 4.
I did, yes. And so I graduated when I was 22, and so I dedicated 18 years of my life to my sport. Which of course includes, your sport-specific training, your swimming, but it also includes weightlifting, your diet, your sleep schedule, your physical rehabilitation, not to mention the social sacrifices. You don't get to go to prom. You don't get to come home for Christmas. You don't get to come home when you're in college. You don't get to come home for summer. We were there every single day, training 6 hours a day, swimming 10 miles a day. It's relatively miserable, but of course... The outcomes are always worth it, which is why we do it.
Absolutely. And your outcomes were actually kind of hindered a little bit because men started competing in women's sports. And so when was like the first time you started to notice that people of the opposite gender were competing in the sport, like a man competing in women's sports?
Really the first time this became relevant to me, especially in my world of swimming, we saw a case of this. It was a female, then transitioning, goes by Skylar Baylor, now competes with the men, and this happened at Harvard. And so I saw this, and I, of course, didn't necessarily support it, but I thought, this is a woman competing with the man. There's no threat here, but it never once occurred to me that this could go the other way, and we would be under threat. It just seemed out of realm, and even if it were to happen, I thought there would be governing bodies in place that wouldn't allow it to happen.
You would think, right?
You would think. And so I didn't become aware of this happening the other way around really until I was directly impacted by it. Yeah. I became aware of this swimmer, Leah Thomas, about November of my senior year. So November of 2021 was the first time that it was brought to my attention that there was a male competing against the women, especially at a level as high as we were competing.
Yeah, and the culmination of so your senior year of college, the culmination of all that work, 18 years of hard work, comes down to the NCAA Championships, in which you were in the same race as Leah Thomas. And as you can see, I'm pulling it up on screen. This is the NCAA, the governing body that's supposed to be protecting you as a swimmer. And you were obviously at this race, but I want to show everybody a little bit of this so that they can kind of understand where you were at physically, so we can talk about where your head was at. So starting off, everybody, here is the beginning of the race in which Leah and Riley actually tied. Here's that.
Take your mark.
Ruck will go out for it. Ivy will go out for it. They may be 2 seconds ahead of Leah Thomas in lane number 5. They have the speed to be able to really jump on this first 100. This is going to be a lot tighter of a race.
So from the beginning, the announcers from the NCAA were obviously very enamored with Leah Thomas, despite the fact that she whatever gets further, it stays around 4th, 5th, 6th, almost the entire race. Where was your head at walking up to the block, getting on, take your mark, go? What were you thinking?
Really, first, before anything, it was a distraction. Swimming is, of course, a lot physical. There's a lot of physical that goes into it, but just like a lot of sports, there's a lot of mental that goes into it too. And so I can't even tell you the mental distraction, the mental hindrance. One, the locker room, that played on our mental toll.
That was another, and I want to let you keep going, but that was one thing I wanted to get into at some point. So Leah was in the same locker room as all the other women?
Yes. Yes. We were not forewarned. We were not told. The only time we became aware that we would be sharing a locker room with Thomas was when we had to sit there and watch this 6'4" man disrobe and show his male parts. That's how we became aware that that's the situation we would be in. It felt like betrayal, belittlement. Of course, it's awkward, embarrassing, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That to me was really worse than the competition piece.
If anyone else if I were to do something like that, it'd be criminal. I would get arrested on the spot.
Now all you have to do is say you're a woman, and it's not only is it just happening, it's encouraged. It's
Exactly.
celebrated.
Exactly. What else was going through your head though, on top of that?
On top of the mental distraction and sense of, wondering of what this outcome would look like, I really felt like I was going into the race with my hands tied behind my back, and not because of the women I was competing against. I knew these women just like myself. We all had a chance to win that national title. We'd all trained. We'd all gone through things that only women go through when it comes to being a woman and what that looks like, especially in regards to training at that level. So that to me, and if I had gotten beaten by them, which I did get beat by some of the girls in that heat, of course, that's not something that frustrates me. I'm proud of those girls. I'm proud of myself for finishing top 5 in the country. Yeah. That's a huge honor. But in regards to competing against a male, of course, you feel like your hands are tied behind your back. You're going into this race with an understanding that there's an inherent unfair advantage, that no matter the training, no matter anything you do, nothing you do will overcome the advantage that Thomas has.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I wanted to get to. So I'm going to play just now the end of the race, because I thought this was interesting as well. Seeing you guys tie, I mean, obviously a lot of people were looking at Miss Ruck, Taylor Ruck, because she won the race. But coming to the end of it, you guys both tied.
Stanford's Taylor Ruck has twice been an NCAA runner-up individually. Ruck has led the entire way, and in the 200-yard freestyle, it's a wire-to-wire win for Taylor Ruck. Isabel Ivy takes.
And then we see, obviously, you in lane 1 and Thomas in lane 5 come both in right there in neck and neck. It was, I believe you guys ended at 1:43.40 was your time, which is incredibly impressive. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was, first of all, watching that again, I remember how badly that hurt. That was not a best time for me. That was, I had added some time, but it definitely was not a best time for Thomas. Thomas added nearly 2 seconds, which in swimming, 2 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, of course, but in swimming, that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so, of course, what's going through my head, I touch the wall, I look at the scoreboard, and I see 5 by my name, indicating I got 5th, which I was honored. I was, that's great. I, of course, knew I could do better, but whatever. It was my last race as a collegiate swimmer. I was glad to be done. And I look at Thomas's name. Actually, before I even looked at my own name, I looked at Thomas's name and I saw the 5. And then I saw my 5 and I looked at my teammates and their jaws were dropped on the side of the pool. And I'm just thinking to myself, there's no way we tied. There's no way. I had already made up my mind that I wasn't going to get on the podium. That was going to be my form of protest. I wanted to swim my race. I didn't think it was fair for me to not swim my last collegiate race ever in terms of boycotting and protesting. So I thought to myself, I won't get on the podium. But now these thoughts are going on in my head, behind the scenes, okay, now if I don't get on the podium, there's not even an empty spot because we have to share the freaking podium.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was thinking. It was this a jumbled mix of emotions, all in a short span of time.
Absolutely. And I mean, it seems incredibly unfair. But one thing I do want to ask is, you mentioned the biological advantage earlier. There are some out there that I've seen that say, well, Leah Thomas came in 5th. She came in 5th. So how could she have a biological advantage? She didn't even win. What would you have to say to people that say things like that?
First of all, I'm not one for speculation. Everything that I say, I try to be well-versed on. I try to research. I try to consider different perspectives, but I can wholeheartedly say that Thomas didn't try. This was all part of a bigger picture. Thomas, the first day, wins the national title, beating Olympians, American record holders by body lengths. The second day gets 5th. The third day, in the 100 freestyle, qualifies top 8 in the morning, which I want to reiterate, top 8 in the country is a phenomenal achievement. But that night dives in this final heat. And once you've secured that top 8 spot in the morning, you are finishing top 8 in the nation, regardless of what time you go. Thomas dives in and literally looks like he doesn't know how to swim. Places 8th. This was sending a message that trans women can compete with women and win, but not always dominate.
So do you think, so are you kind of saying that maybe, and obviously it's not confirmed, that Leah kind of threw the race a little bit and waited?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were competing against someone who was actively giving their second best, which again, in a sport where we've dedicated our entire lives, especially those 4 collegiate years, to merely shave 1/100ths of a second off, merely 1/100ths. We're going against someone who is actively giving their second best. That's what that is.
That's crazy. How do other swimmers feel in this? Taylor Rock, and I know in that NCAA video that I was showing, Taylor like congratulates Leah afterwards. Did everybody feel supportive of this, or was there or did they feel almost pushed into being supportive, other in fears that they'd be called transphobic or anything like that?
Yeah, no, it's that. Of course, I can't speak for every single person, but I know a lot of girls in that heat who I have had conversations with feel the exact same way I do. I won't say their names because it's not my place to out them in that way. But the overwhelming majority of girls at that competition, the overwhelming majority of people in this country, even the overwhelming majority of the Democratic Party, but in regards to that competition, the overwhelming majority of us knew that was wrong. We knew that we shouldn't have to share that locker room with the man. We knew the silencing that we were facing was wrong. But again, these girls were scared of the retaliation. They were fearful. There was actually an interview just released yesterday. Her name is Paula Scanlon with Matt Walsh. I highly encourage everyone to go listen to it because she does a good job depicting of what these universities and these athletic departments and these institutions are doing to really silence these girls.
Yeah, I had a chance actually to watch that, and I was wondering, because she implicates you. Well, she basically thanks you in that video, saying that you were part of her inspiration for wanting to come forward. Obviously, she was mentioned anonymously, or was interviewed anonymously for Matt Walsh's highly successful "What Is a Woman." How does it feel to know that there are other people like Paula coming out and saying that you were an inspiration for them?
This is never something I could have wanted for myself. This is never something that I could have been equipped for. This is something that I was entirely thrusted into. And so to be a voice of reason for others, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm continuing to do this. It would be really easy for me to essentially just ride off into the sunset, continue on with the plans that I thought I had pursuing endodontics, which is like root canals. That's what I thought my life was going to look like.
Yeah.
And it would be really easy for me to do that. But to know that my voice and my courage, I hate to say that this even takes courage, but I understand that it does, that my courage and my voice helped Paula find her courage and her voice. It alerts me that courage begets courage and it's contagious. And I'm certain, I'm confident that more and more women will start speaking about this, using their platforms to talk about this and how it's wrong. That being said, I feel like this conversation very quickly gets centered around women and girls, but men are not clear here either. We need men. We need men to use their voice. We need men with platforms, male athletes, coaches, whatever that looks like, to be willing to boycott, to speak on this as well. We need everyone. Men, women, coaches, medical professionals, parents, all of it.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I want to get into a lot more of that activism, but I did have one more question regarding Leah Thomas. And this is a big one that a lot of people have talked to me about. And I feel like a lot of people are skeptical of it. Do you actually think that Leah Thomas believes he is a woman? Or do you think he's using womanhood as a costume to get attention and success? I know you can't get into his mind necessarily, but from a personal standpoint, what do you think?
I definitely think there's some delusion there. But in regards to being gender dysphoric, I've really tried to understand this. Obviously, I'm not gender dysphoric. I know I'm a woman. So this is not something I had a great understanding of what it meant to have this, to feel this. And so I've talked with many trans identifying individuals and asked what gender dysphoria is really like. And they all have told me that in regards to a locker room and undressing, being gender dysphoric, you would never undress in front of in a room full of the opposite sex. If you're truly dysphoric about your gender and what, you possess, you would never do that. It's also been confirmed since this meet that Thomas has been engaging in social media posts that claim he is an AGP, which means autogynephiliac, which means you're just sexually aroused as dressing as a woman. And that's a transvestite or cross-dresser. That's not someone who is truly transgender. Yet we were forced to participate in this fetish. That's ultimately what I think this is. Again, I can't get in his brain. I can't understand fully, but based off of the conversations that I've had and the posts and the comments and the likes that Thomas has engaged in, I think there's some speculation to be had.
Absolutely. Well, transitioning from that now onto like the activism portion of your life, because this, like you said, this isn't something you had planned for. It was something you probably never imagined to be a part of. But you've now have become, I would say, probably the leading activist in terms of protecting women's sports. And a common question, Matt Walsh got this on Dr. Phil about a year ago, and I think it's really simple, but I love to hear what people have to say. Why do you care? Why does this matter to you?
Why it matters to me, several reasons. The biggest, though, is really not protecting women's sports. It's not really the freedom of speech. Of course, those are pieces of it. But what this is they're asking us to deny objective truth. They're asking us to deny biological reality. They're asking us to deny biblical truth. And that's really chilling to think about. It's as if we're living in this George Orwell dystopian novel where they're trying to make us say 2 + 2 is 5. And people are saying it. And if you don't, then you're punished. It's this concept of groupthink. And we're actively leading ourselves in that direction. That's what our administration and our universities and our institutions and the people who lead this country, that's what they want to instill. They want to control our thoughts. They want to control our feelings. They want to control what we say. And that's really scary. You can open any history book and see how that turns out for any other civilization, and it's not pretty. And so I think that, to me, is a big underlying problem of denying objective truth. 2, why this matters to me is I see the value in sports and women playing sports. I saw the benefits that I reaped. I have a little sister, and she's probably all my family. My dad, he played in the NFL. My mom, she played softball. All my family were athletes, and my little sister's probably the best athlete of us all. I'm never going to admit that to her, but I can't imagine her not having the opportunities that I had. And of course, fighting for those past women who fought for Title IX, who fought for me. It only feels right that I fight back for them. In their same lifetime, they saw the benefits of Title IX, and now they're seeing that being taken away.
Absolutely.
And really the third thing of why I care, I'll be brief, is being a Christian, I see this as spiritual warfare. And I see, God put us on this planet to communicate his message. And I think that's crucial to do.
I love hearing that, especially when it comes to the faith piece of it. When it comes to your activism now, and I love hearing all of the reasons why you're doing it, but you've now been able to go on to, like I said in the introduction, many different news platforms. You've even been speaking on college campuses. Most recently, I know I heard of multiple news stories, one in Buffalo, New York, in which a protester was arrested for apparent harassment. There was also one that went viral just before that of when you were at San Francisco State University. I have that video of apparently you being held hostage. I want to play that for everybody, and then I'd love to hear kind of a play-by-play of what happened, if that's okay.
And what we're hoping to do is to keep things peaceful and
Make her lose her flight.
and move forward. Okay. Tell her to pay us. Tell her to pay us, and then she can go. $10 each. Because you might get paid for this shit, so we can get paid for it too.
On a public campus that we attend.
So what's the end goal here? We're cooperating, so what's next?
So
So they need to do their job. We created a path. It's here.
I can't speak to all of you when we're over talking to each other. We're not going to hear each other.
Don't let her hold.
They know. You don't have to use. There's a difference.
So they end up, as you know, they end up getting everybody kind of quieted down, but they're saying that they don't want to let you come home and say that they want to charge them money to allow you out. What was going on here?
First of all, you only see a little clip of this. I endured this for over 3.5 hours of these protesters outside this room, yelling the most hateful, awful, vengeful, violent, terrible things at myself and the officers. They were negotiating money. There were several instances when I could hear them outside the room saying, if you want to make it home safely to see your family again, you have to pay us. It's only fair. You got paid to be here. I think they were under the assumption that the university paid me to be there, which is not true. The university would have paid me probably to not be there. So I think they were under this assumption that I was getting paid. And they said, if you're getting paid to be here, you have to pay us to leave. And the officers in the room, of course, I respect all law enforcement, but these officers did nothing. There has been no action since. There has been no expulsions. There has been no repercussions for anyone involved. Actually, the university doubled down on this stance. Their vice president of student affairs, Dr. Jamila Moore, sent an email out to their student body saying she was so proud. I applaud the bravery of our students who acted so peacefully and protested the personally abhorrent person such as Riley Gaines, who only spreads violence.
Oh my God.
Yes, it was crazy. And to read that, not once did this email say they uphold freedom of speech. Not once did they say they condemn violence against women. That shows you the true direction in which universities and college campuses are going.
And that's also California for you too. California over there, California, whatever. But I would say honestly, the same thing would probably not the exact same thing, but something similar would happen if you came to Illinois State where I'm at. So you're right. It is an infection of our college campuses. And a lot of people want to speak out in a similar way that you do, but they fear that retribution. So what do you have to say to those that are sitting at home right now, possibly watching, listening to this interview? And they want to fight just as much, but don't know how to, and are also might lack that courage.
My number one advice is to be bold. I know it can be scary. It is scary, but I have to put it into perspective for myself. Of course, the cancel culture we live in and being labeled any kind of name is scary, but what's scarier is not standing for the truth. That's scarier to me. Mm-hmm. I will say really quickly, there's just a few moments ago, I got off a call with this girl from Illinois, and she called me and she said, I swim for this team. We practice at the YMCA and we've had this man keep coming into our locker room. And so I went to my coach about it and he made us think he was doing something to fix the problem. And so, we continued going to the locker room and every day it kept happening. And so because the coach wasn't really doing anything, she said, myself and my teammates, we got together, we made posters, and these posters just said simple things, protect women's spaces, simple things, and they put them up in the locker room. Mm-hmm. She said the next day she went back to practice. Her coach pulled them all out of the water and said, all the girls, and said, who put those posters in the locker room? And the girl stepped forward and she said, I was a part of it. And he kicked her off the team. And she now is not allowed to compete on that team anymore for wanting to uphold. And again, this girl she's 14 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And right there in Illinois. And I wanted to say that to give you perspective. And she just called me. And this happens all the time where I'm getting calls like this. And so again, my advice, be bold, be like that girl from Illinois, make noise, ruffle feathers, step on toes. And I know, especially as Christians, we want to be peacemakers. We want to respond with empathy and have compassion. Of course we do. And that's what our God tells us to do. But he also hates sin. And what's happening right now is it's an abomination. Mm-hmm. And it's our job to call out something when it's unjust. And what's happening is entirely unjust to women. Be bold. Know how your state stands too. I think that's really important. There have been 22 states thus far that have passed some sort of fairness in women's sports bill. Of course, that means the majority of states have not. Know where your state stands, contact your legislator or your state senator, and let them know how you feel. Let them know that this is important to you, their constituents. And my message to parents is to defend your daughters and to teach your sons masculinity. There's this saying, and it's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And it's the cycle, and it's actually pretty interesting. You can look and see how that's played out throughout history. And I think we're in this time period of weak men creating hard times, which we can only hope that means hard times create strong men, but we need parents to teach masculinity again.
We can only hope. You're right. And speaking of strong men, switching gears a lot, but recently it was big news. You endorsed Governor of Florida, Ron Desantis, for president for 2024. This is obviously a divisive topic, even among just the right. And not that you're shy from divisive topics by any means, but can you tell me a little bit more about what led to that decision to endorse Governor Ron DeSantis?
Absolutely. It took a lot of thinking. It took a lot of praying. Did I want to involve myself in this capacity? I knew what it meant. I knew, especially in a primary as heated as this one, where there's so much at stake because really our country is on the line. I knew what this meant, but ultimately I came to the conclusion that this is something that I'm passionate about. This is something that I care about. Therefore, I want to do everything in my power to make sure we get the person in office, especially in regards to these cultural issues that are plaguing our country. We need a person in office who will draw the line and who will say enough is enough. That's the leadership we need, especially, again, in comparison to what we have now, who can't even define what a woman is. Thinking that, understanding that, and seeing the success that Governor DeSantis has had in Florida surrounding these issues, whether that be within the education system, whether that be, of course, in regards to women's sports, whatever that looks like, he has said enough is enough. And he's handled it with grace. He's handled it with such success. And everyone in his state values him for it. I shouldn't say everyone. Majority of his state values him for that. And people are flocking to Florida. Yeah. The economy is booming. There's all kinds of different reasons why people are moving to Florida. Seeing that, again, the leadership that he's possessed in regards to these cultural issues, that is why I think Ron DeSantis will make a phenomenal president in 2024.
Well, and I've been honest on this show before multiple times that I'm leaning much towards Ron DeSantis as well for 2024. But there are obviously a ton of candidates for the Republican nomination. It's a crowded race. We just saw recently Chris Christie, Mike Pence have entered the race, but it really seems like it's boiling down to two candidates, and that's obviously Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. Tell me, if you can, a little bit more about why DeSantis over Donald Trump. One, in terms of how each composes themselves, I think it's relatively easy to understand. And look, I truly think Trump's policies, this isn't to bash Trump. It's to just say that DeSantis has the leadership to get things done. He's young, he's ambitious, he's the best governor in modern history. And I think we can all agree on that. We need him in a position where he can really expand his territory at the federal level. This is something that the country needs to feel and needs to see and needs to experience. This type of leadership, this type of winning, this type of success among these issues. This breakdown of family that we're seeing, the breakdown of faith and the breakdown of freedoms, it really is criminal. And we need someone who's going to uphold those values. And I think Ron DeSantis will. Well, that I think that's honestly probably one of the best defenses of Ron over Trump that I've ever heard. I have just a few more questions, kind of off topic, but I just think that they're really relevant today. The first being, many corporations have faced backlash recently for their support of the transgender ideology. Bud Light, obviously, has Dylan Mulvaney as an influencer. Target had swimsuits that I'm sure would be great for your former opponent, Leah Thomas, the tuck-friendly swimsuits. What do you think should be done about companies like this going woke? I'm glad that they're getting boycotted. I'm truly surprised. Mm-hmm. I think the Bud Light thing, it is what pushed people over that edge. They missed their mark so bad on their target audience.
I have never seen a trans identifying individual drink a Bud Light. And so to go with that campaign, it was stupid. And that's why they're in the position they're in. And these companies, they don't follow blue or red. They follow green. That's what they follow. Bud Light's seen the atrocity that this has caused and the repercussions that they have faced monetarily in terms of, or I guess fiscally. Now they're trying to come out with campaigns. You know, they have this camo beer can, and they have all of these commercials with these burly men on motorcycles, but they're too far gone. That's not an apology. And that's what we need. We need accountability and we need an apology. I think that's reasonable. I think that's understandable. What Bud Light did, what Target is doing, what Tampax, Ulta, I mean, the list goes on at this point. Hershey's, I mean, really, I have a list on my phone of companies that I won't buy from again.
Yeah.
What they're doing is a mockery. It really is. And attacking children, which Target is doing, that's just perverse and sick. That's so twisted to put this kind of artwork and this kind of sayings and you know, depictions on infant clothing. That shows me that this is a spiritual battle. When you're trying to attack children and going for that vulnerable population, you know, there's an ulterior motive.
Absolutely. Just a few more. You touched on your faith a little bit earlier. I just want, in terms of your lifelong swimming, your activism now, what role has faith played in every sector of your life?
It's always been a huge piece of my life. It really has. I'm very fortunate to have a family that raised me to be strong in my faith. To have a strong family foundation in general is such a blessing. But this past year, really, I've been so spiritually awakened. Just seeing how evidently our God works and how he moves and how he puts people in places. That being said, how clearly his opposition works. And how Satan moves through people and how he puts people in places and the deception that he carries, whether that's in the media, whether that's in Hollywood and our celebrities, which we see a lot of, in education and corporations. There's so many places where Satan is alive, and it's obvious. And so my faith has been a big push for me as to why I continue moving forward. In Mark and Luke, it says it's not the healthy who need the doctor, it's the sick. And I constantly keep that verse in my head as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. So it's been a very big portion of my life, and it's what I lean on pretty heavily.
It's really interesting that you bring up that phrase in Mark and Luke, because my final question that I had was, do you have a personal philosophy that you live by, a motto or something like that? Would it be that, or is there something else that you're consistently thinking of?
Yeah, you know, there are a couple verses, Bible verses that I keep in my head. One of which is Romans 8:18, which is, for our present sufferings aren't worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed. And I really like that verse. It's always been my favorite verse, but this past year, again, it's remained so relevant. Our present sufferings in regards to the backlash, in regards to the arrows that I take, in regards to my busy schedules where I don't get to see my husband that much. You know, all of the sufferings that I've endured really throughout all of this. It's so worth it when you compare it to the glory and the success and really just the understanding of what the fight is about and who you're helping and why you're helping. And so that's been something that I live by, I constantly think about. So those are really the two verses I constantly think about.
That's amazing. And your hope is honestly inspirational. Finally, Riley, I just want to make sure everybody knows, like, what's next for you? Where can they find you? How can they support you?
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter. It's Riley_Gaines_. I always try and post breaking stories, highlighting how politicians are responding, whether it's good, bad, just so people don't believe the narrative that it's a non-issue and that it's not happening, and all of those silly things that are so far from the truth. That's how people can find me.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Riley. I appreciate all your time. Honestly, I can't believe that we were able to get you on, and just thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you like this interview, share it with everybody. Riley is amazing. Don't forget to follow her on Twitter.